My brother-in-law set the folder down on the table the way men do when they want you to feel small, slow, deliberate. Like he was laying a trap and daring you to step into it. He smiled at me across the room full of people who already didn't think much of me, and said, "Marcus, we need to talk about your future. Or more specifically, the lack of one. My name is Marcus Cole. I've been married to Sophie for 4 years. She grew up in Charleston, South Carolina, in a house with columns out front and a last name that opened doors before you knocked. Her family built the Hargrove Real Estate Group from regional land deals in the 1980s into one of the largest private development firms in the Southeast. Her brother, Derek Hargrove, has run it as CEO for the last 6 years. He plays golf on Thursdays, drives a new Range Rover every 14 months, and has never once let me forget that in his opinion, Sophie could have done better. What Derek doesn't know, what nobody in that family knows, is that the Hargrove Real Estate Group has been quietly funded, restructured, and saved from bankruptcy twice in the last 5 years by a private equity firm called Crestline Capital Partners. I am Crestline Capital Partners. Not the face of it. Not the name on the brochure. The actual owner. The sole managing partner. The man whose signature sits at the bottom of every major financing agreement Derek Hargrove has ever celebrated as his own triumph. I built Crestline when I was 26, after my third real estate flip turned into something I couldn't ignore anymore. I kept it quiet on purpose. I grew up with nothing, and I watched what money did to people when they knew you had it. I didn't want that. I didn't want to spend my life wondering if people liked me or liked what I was worth. So when Sophie and I started dating, I let her see me as I actually was, a guy who worked hard, thought carefully, and didn't need anyone to validate him. She fell in love with that man, and I never wanted to take him away from her. What I didn't expect was her family. The dinner Derek chose was at the Palmetto Club, which is exactly the kind of place that has a waiting list for memberships and paintings of fox hunts on the walls. He'd scheduled it as a family check-in, which is the Hargrove way of saying someone was about to be managed. Sophie sat beside me. Her mother was across from us, wearing the same tight smile she always wore when she was about to say something she'd already rehearsed. Derek sat at the head of the table, which was not lost on anyone. We were halfway through the appetizers when he opened the folder. Inside was a single document. A job offer. Not for me, for Sophie. A VP position at a competing firm in Atlanta, conveniently requiring relocation, conveniently structured so her salary would be her primary household income. He slid it toward her like he was doing us a favor. "It's a real opportunity," he said. "Fresh start. Atlanta is booming. And frankly, Sophie, you've been underutilized since the wedding." He didn't look at me when he said the last part. He didn't need to. My wife picked up the document and read it quietly. I watched her face. She was trying to figure out what to feel. Her mother leaned in. "We just want what's best for you, sweetheart. It's been 4 years, and Marcus is still," she paused, choosing her word like she was picking something off a menu, "finding his footing." I set down my fork. Finding my footing. I thought about the 47 employees at Crestline who'd never missed a paycheck. I thought about the 3 properties in Charleston that carried the Hargrove name on the signage and my signature on the debt restructuring agreements. I thought about the Tuesday night 6 years ago when Derek called his family together and told them the firm was in trouble, that a silent investor had stepped in to keep them afloat, that they were going to be okay. I had been that investor. I had watched through a conference window while Derek shook hands with my attorney and called himself lucky. I said nothing. Not yet. I wanted to see how far they would go. "The timing is actually ideal," Derek continued, turning to me now with the practiced warmth of someone who has spent years delivering bad news professionally. "Sophie's best years professionally are right now. And Marcus, no offense, but your income ceiling is visible from here. I've looked into your work. Small deals. Residential flips. Nothing wrong with it. But it's not what my sister needs to build a life on." Sophie put the document down. "Derek, I'm being honest. You're being condescending." He softened his voice, which was somehow worse. "I'm being practical. You're 32. You want a family eventually. You need a foundation. Real security. Marcus is a good guy." He looked at me with something close to pity. "I'm sure you work hard. But good intentions don't build futures." The table was quiet. 2 tables over, a couple was laughing about something, and the sound of it felt very far away. I picked up my water glass. Took a slow sip. Set it back down exactly where it had been. "Can I ask you something?" I said. Derek nodded with the generous patience of someone who has already decided the conversation is over. "Do you know who holds the senior debt on the Hargrove Riverside project? The mixed-use development on Meeting Street you broke ground on last spring?" He blinked. "That's a private financing arrangement." "It is," I agreed. "Do you know the name of the firm?" "Marcus, I don't see how." "Crestline Capital Partners. I said. The same firm that refinanced your Somerville portfolio in 2021 when your primary lender pulled out. The same firm that provided the bridge loan that kept your payroll running in Q3 of 2020 when the pandemic hit your commercial tenants. The same firm your attorney described to you as a quiet institutional partner with a long-term view. The color in Derek's face did something interesting. It didn't disappear all at once. It retreated, slowly, like a tide going out. That's a coincidence, he said carefully. I reached into the inside pocket of my jacket and pulled out a business card. Clean, matte white, simple. I slid it across the table to him. He looked at it, then up at me, then back down at it. Crestline Capital Partners. Marcus Cole. Managing partner. I've owned that firm since before you and I ever met, I said. Every dollar that has quietly kept the Hargrove Real Estate Group solvent for the past 5 years has come through me. And I never mentioned it, because I didn't marry Sophie to sit at tables like this and make men like you feel small. I married her because she's the best person I've ever known, and I wanted one thing in my life that had nothing to do with balance sheets. The silence that followed was the kind that has weight to it. You could feel it pressing on the table, on the silverware, on the painting of the fox hunt on the wall behind Derek's head. My mother-in-law's hand was frozen halfway to her water glass. Sophie was looking at me. Not with confusion. With something slower and more complicated than that. Like she was pressing a button and waiting to see what lit up. You're serious, Derek said. His voice had gone flat. I can pull up the founding documents on my phone if that's helpful, I said. Or you can call your CFO. He knows the Crestline name. He just doesn't know my face. Derek closed the folder. Slowly. Like he was hoping something different would be inside it when he opened it again. His mother finally lowered her hand. She looked at her son. Then at me. Then at her plate. She did not look at Sophie. This doesn't change anything, Derek said. His jaw was tight. He was a man who managed things, and right now he was managing the only thing he had left, his composure. Sophie's opportunity is still real. The offer stands regardless of what? Sophie said. He stopped. Regardless of what, Derek? Her voice was quiet, but it had an edge in it, I recognized. I'd heard it once before, the night she told me why she'd stopped speaking to a college friend who'd spent 3 years asking her to make herself smaller. Regardless of the fact that the man you just spent 20 minutes condescending to has been quietly saving our family's company? Or regardless of the fact that you didn't know, and now you feel stupid, and you need to find a way to make that my problem? He said nothing. She picked up the job offer, squared its corners neatly against the table, and placed it back in the folder. Then she slid the folder to the center of the table, equidistant between them, like a period at the end of a sentence. I'm not moving to Atlanta, she said. We left before dessert. The drive home took 34 minutes. Sophie didn't speak for the first 20. I kept both hands on the wheel and let the radio stay off and the silence stay full. We crossed the bridge over the marsh and the sunset was doing something extravagant over the water. Pink and orange and completely indifferent to everything that had just happened. How long? She finally asked. Crestline? 8 years. The involvement with your family's company? 5. She nodded, very slowly, like she was adding something up. You met Derek before we started dating, she said. At that industry conference in Charlotte? Yes. He didn't know who you were. He'd never seen my face. He'd only dealt with my attorneys. Another long silence. Did you know who he was? When we met? This was the question I had spent a long time preparing for, and I answered it exactly the way I'd always planned to, which was with the truth. No. When I met you, I didn't connect your last name to the Hargrove Group for about 3 weeks. By the time I did, I already knew I was going to love you, and I was terrified, and I made the decision to keep the two things completely separate. You were not a business calculation. You were never a business calculation. She looked out the window. We passed a gas station, a row of live oaks, a church with a broken letter on its sign. You let us struggle, she said. Our first apartment. When my car broke down. When I was stressed about money for our honeymoon. We weren't struggling, I said. I was living within what I wanted you to believe was my income. There's a difference. That's a fine line, Marcus. I know. It feels like a lie. It is a lie, I said. And I'm not going to argue that it isn't. I just want you to understand what I was trying to protect. She turned to look at me then. Tell me. I've watched what wealth does to relationships. My father came into money when I was 12, sold a piece of land that had been in our family for 3 generations. By the time I was 16, every person in my father's life was in some way organized around what they could get from him. His brothers. His friends. Even his second wife. I watched him become a transaction. I decided when I was very young that I would never let that happen to me. I would find someone who loved me for exactly what I showed them, and I would know it was real, because there would be nothing else to love me for. The marsh was behind us now. We were pulling into our neighborhood, the quiet street with the old magnolias that had sold her on the house before we'd even gone inside. And then her brother tried to buy you off with a job offer, she said softly. He tried to relocate you away from me using a manufactured opportunity designed to make me feel like a liability. That's a specific kind of move, Sophie. It's not malicious exactly. It's just he looked at me and made a calculation, and the calculation was that I wasn't worth accounting for. I wanted to see how far that went before I said anything. She was quiet until I pulled into the driveway. Then she said, "You could have told me. At any point. You could have trusted me." "I know. Do you?" "Yes. And I'm sorry I didn't. Not for protecting the principle of it, I'm not sorry for that. But for the moments where you were anxious about things I could have easily fixed, and I let you carry that. That part I'm sorry for." She got out of the car, walked to the front steps and sat down on the top one, still in her dinner dress, her heels on the step below. I sat beside her. The neighborhood was quiet. Someone 3 houses down was grilling something. A kid was riding a bike in a driveway circle. "I need a few days," she said. "Okay. I'm not going anywhere. I just need to think." "I know, and Marcus." She looked at me directly. "Don't hide anything else from me. Whatever comes next, just tell me. I can handle the truth." I couldn't always handle the performance. Derek called at 8:47 the next morning. I let it go to voicemail. He called again at 11:15. At 2:30 the afternoon, he sent an email with the subject line, "Crestline Urgent." The body of it was 3 sentences. He needed to speak with me privately. The board was meeting Friday. There were complications. There were indeed complications. What Derek had announced to his board of directors 3 months earlier without consulting Crestline, without notifying me through any channel, without so much as a courtesy call to my CFO, was a joint venture with a developer out of Nashville. A $47 million mixed-use project. He had committed Hargrove equity to the deal and told his board the silent partner had signed off. He had forged a letter of intent in Crestline's name. I know this because my attorney told me at 9 o'clock Friday morning, 2 hours before the board meeting Derek had summoned me to. I sat in my attorney's office on King Street with a cup of coffee and a very specific kind of calm that only arrives when you've spent years preparing for exactly this scenario. He signed off using the Crestline letterhead, my attorney said. His CFO has a copy. The Nashville developer has a copy. It's been submitted to 3 financial institutions. That's fraud. I said. It is. Does Derek know we know? He knows you know about the company. He doesn't know what we know about the letter. I finished my coffee. Set the cup down. I'll handle the meeting. The Hargrove offices were in a building on East Bay Street that the family had owned for 2 decades. Good bones, original heart pine floors, a lobby that smelled like money and wood polish. The receptionist looked at me the way people look at someone they know, they should recognize but can't place. I gave her my name. She made a call. Her expression shifted. Derek met me at the elevator. He was wearing his best suit, which I recognized as the armor it was. He shook my hand with the grip of a man trying to establish something. "Appreciate you coming," he said, smooth, practiced. He'd had time to recalibrate. "Of course," I said. The conference room was full. 8 board members, a general counsel, Derek's CFO, and 2 men from the Nashville developers team who had flown in and were now sitting with the particular stiffness of people who have realized the meeting they came to is not the meeting they're actually in. Derek stood at the head of the table. I took the open seat nearest the door. "Gentlemen," Derek began, "as you know, we're here to finalize the structure of the Meridian Nashville joint venture. We have our partners from Pinnacle Development in from Tennessee, and we're ready to move this into the execution phase." He looked at me. "We're also pleased to have Marcus Cole joining us today, representing Crestline Capital. This partnership has been foundational to Hargrove's growth, and we're looking forward to formalizing." "Derek?" I said it quietly. He stopped. "I'm going to need you to pause for a moment," I said. "Because before this goes any further, I'd like to ask your general counsel a question." I looked at the man at the end of the table, a trim gray-haired attorney I dealt with precisely once before, through my own attorney, under entirely different circumstances. "Did you review the letter of intent that was submitted to the Nashville development team and to First Carolina Bank in Crestline Capital's name?" A pause. "I reviewed it, yes." "Did you verify its authenticity with Crestline directly?" A longer pause. "It came through our CEO's office." "I assumed." "You assumed," I said gently. "Okay. I want to be respectful of everyone's time here, so I'm going to say this simply." I looked around the table. Crestline Capital Partners did not draft, review, approve, or sign any letter of intent related to the Meridian Nashville project. Whatever document was submitted in our name was not authorized by me or by any member of my team. I became aware of its existence 72 hours ago. The room went very still. One of the men from Nashville leaned slowly back in his chair. Derek said, "Marcus, I think there's been a miscommunication." "There hasn't," I said. "I've been very precise with my language. Would you like me to repeat it?" The general counsel had gone the color of old chalk. He was looking at a folder in front of him with the concentration of a man who is trying to determine how bad his problem is. "The financial institutions that received the letter will need to be notified," I continued. "Your investors will need to be briefed. The Nashville project, as currently structured, does not have Crestline's participation, commitment, or capital. That's the factual baseline. What happens next is a legal question that I'll leave to the appropriate parties." I stood. "I'm happy to cooperate fully with any inquiry. My attorneys have already been in contact this morning." I picked up my bag, looked at Derek one last time. He was standing at the head of his table, in his best suit, in his family's building, and everything he had built around himself, the authority, the certainty, the careful management of other people's perceptions, was sitting in a folder in front of a very unhappy general counsel, dissolving. "You built something real here," I said. "And I meant it. The core of this company is solid. Good properties, good people. That doesn't have to be the end of it. But this," I gestured at the room, at the folder, at the Nashville men with their stiff posture, "this has to get cleaned up honestly. I think you know that." He said nothing. I walked to the elevator alone. The legal process took 11 weeks. Derek's personal attorney negotiated with mine. The forged letter was retracted. The Nashville deal was restructured without Hargrove involvement. No criminal charges were filed, because I didn't push for them, and because Derek's attorneys were good at their jobs, and because the cleanup, when it came, was relatively contained. What changed was the company's structure. In the restructuring that followed, necessary to reassure investors and retain Crestline as an ongoing partner, Derek stepped down from the CEO role. Not dramatically. Not publicly. He was given the title of Chairman Emeritus, which sounds important and means very little. The day-to-day operations moved to a professional management team that reported to the board. And the board now had a formal seat for Crestline Capital, which meant a formal seat for me. Not hidden. Not silent. Present. I told Sophie everything, in pieces, over those 11 weeks. Not all at once, because it wasn't a story that fit in one sitting. We talked about it on weekends, on the back porch where the wisteria was coming in, over dinners that neither of us dressed up for. She asked hard questions and I answered them without editing. She processed it the way she processes most things, slowly, carefully. With the particular honesty that I had loved about her since the night we met, when she told me exactly what she thought of a movie I'd recommended and refused to soften it when she saw my face. One evening about 6 weeks in, she came and sat beside me on the porch steps and said, "I've been thinking about why I'm not more angry." "Are you not angry?" "Not the way I expected to be." She pulled her knees up. "I think because you were never lying about who you were. You were lying about what you had. And those are different things." "They are," I said. "Though one involved the other." "You're not going to argue me out of forgiving you," she said. "I know better than to try." She laughed, which was the first time I'd heard her laugh in what felt like a long time, and it sounded exactly the same as it always had. Her parents took longer. Her mother called Sophie 3 times in the first month, each call lasting exactly long enough to imply that this was all somehow Sophie's fault for not choosing someone more legible. Her father, a quieter man who had mostly let Derek run things for years, sent me a handwritten note that said simply, "I misjudged you. I'm sorry." It was 4 lines. It was enough. Derek and I did not speak for 2 months. When we did, it was in a conference room with attorneys present, which is not a setting that encourages intimacy. He looked tired. The performed authority was gone. What was underneath it, I was surprised to find, was just a man who had spent 20 years trying to prove he deserved something he was born into, and who had made one very bad decision when he felt it slipping away. I didn't forgive him for the fraud. You don't forgive something like that in one sitting. But I didn't want to destroy him either. What I wanted was simple, and I said it plainly, with no attorneys in the room. At the end of a meeting that had no agenda, your family built something worth keeping. I've been protecting it for 5 years. I'd like to keep doing that, but not quietly anymore. He looked at me for a long time. Then he said, "Why? If you have the leverage, why not just take it?" "Because it was never mine to take," I said. "Sophie loves her family. That company is part of what she came from. You think I want to dismantle the thing that mattered to the woman I married?" He didn't say anything for a while. The afternoon light came in through the window sideways and lit up the dust on the old conference table. "I owe you an apology," he finally said. "For the dinner. For the job offer. For the way I talked to you." "You do? I thought you were nothing." "I know. And you just let me? I needed to know who you were when you thought I was." He nodded slowly. It's the kind of nod a person does when they're putting something away rather than resolving it. I understood that. There are things you don't fully metabolize. You just learn to carry them differently. The press release went out on a Tuesday, which is the day you release things you want people to actually read. Crestline Capital Partners announces strategic transition to active partnership with Hargrove Real Estate Group. Managing partner Marcus Cole to join board. It ran in the Charleston Business Journal and got picked up by 2 regional outlets and 1 national real estate trade publication. By noon, my phone had more messages than I'd received in the previous 3 months combined. College friends, former colleagues. 3 people I hadn't spoken to since before I married Sophie. One of her cousins, who had made a joke at our rehearsal dinner about Sophie settling for a fixer-upper. He sent me a LinkedIn request, which I accepted and then very quietly ignored. Sophie was in the kitchen when I came home that evening. She was making the pasta she makes when she's in a particular mood, nothing fancy, just good ingredients. The kind of cooking that looks effortless and isn't. She handed me a glass of wine without turning around. "How many messages?" she asked. "More than I want to count." "How many from people who acted like you were nobody?" I thought about it. "Most of them." She stirred the pasta. "That's what I thought." We ate on the back porch because the evening was good and the wisteria smelled like it had opinions about the weather. The light went slow and pink over the neighbor's roofline. A dog was barking somewhere distant and irregular, the sound of a dog that isn't alarmed, just announcing itself. "Are you happy?" Sophie asked. She was looking at her plate when she said it, and then she looked up at me. I thought about what the question actually meant, which is what I always do before I answer. Not whether things had resolved. Not whether the external arrangement was satisfying. But whether the feeling behind it, the reason I'd built any of it in the first place, was intact. "Yes," I said. "Not because of Tuesday. Because of right now." She put her fork down. Looked at me the way she had in the car coming home from the Palmetto Club, that slow, careful calculation. "I need to ask you something," she said. "Okay." When Derek slid that folder across the table. When he made that speech about your income ceiling and my best years. She paused. "You already knew everything you were going to do." "Yes. But you sat there quietly." "For how long?" "Long enough to see all of it." "Why?" "I thought about my father. About a kitchen table in a house that stopped being a home the year everyone understood what was in the bank account. About the particular loneliness of being known only through what you owned. Because I needed to know it was real." I said. "All of it? You, us, who we were together, I needed it to be tested by something true. Not by a performance. I didn't want to save you from anything. I just wanted to know that what was here." I put my hand on the table between us, not reaching for her hand, just placing it there, was here because it wanted to be. She was quiet for a long time. A comfortable quiet. The kind that belongs to people who have been through something together and come out with their edges worn smooth rather than jagged. Then she reached across the table and put her hand over mine. "It is," she said. The wisteria moved in the slight evening breeze. The dog stopped barking. The light finished doing what it was doing and let the dark come in gently. I had spent 8 years building something I never put my name on. Not because I was ashamed of it, but because I wanted to be certain that the name itself wasn't the thing being loved. And now my name was on it, in a press release, in a business journal, on a door on the 4th floor of a building on East Bay Street. It felt the same as it always had. Which was exactly the point. You don't need to be loud to matter. You don't need to announce yourself to every room you walk into. What you build in patience and in quiet is still built. The foundation doesn't care whether anyone is watching when you pour it. But there comes a moment, and you know it when it arrives. Because the silence has a different texture to it when the quiet has done its work. And the light is yours to step into, and the only thing left is to walk forward without apology. I did,